always bet on yourself. No one's going to do
Mm,
it like you. No one's going to do it as good as you. No one's going to do it as beautiful, creative, incredible as you. You have something so important to share with the world that we need. And if you're not sharing it, we're missing out. You're missing out. So take the risk, bet on yourself, put it out there. It doesn't have to be on social media or anything crazy, but someone in your orbit needs what you have, and don't not put it out there because of fear or because of a lack of trust. So I'm betting on you. I hope you're betting on yourself too.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of the day it is that you are tuning in and watching this episode or listening to this episode. Welcome back to Beyond the Surface. Welcome back to another episode. And today I am so honored and excited to dive into conversation with you today, Alicia. Thank you so much for being here and
Yeah,
for trusting me. You know, two strangers coming together, just having a chat. So
I
thank
love
you
it
so much
though.
for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, I would love to start off and just give you the full floor, so to speak, and just have you just share a little bit about who you are, the beautiful things that you do in this world. But yeah, whatever you feel called to share.
Yeah, my name is Alicia. I currently live down in Miami, Florida. This is my fifth state that I have lived in, so I've been all over the country. But I have two companies. One, I have a private practice where my role is a clinical social worker, and I see a lot of folks who are struggling with perhaps their fertility journey, their postpartum journey. And I also have a number of clients, adjustment disorders, life transitions, the generalized anxiety we all probably have, especially in a post-COVID era. But yeah, so a good mix of folks, but I have a great base of clients. I love what I do as a therapist. It's very rewarding. My background's also in trauma. I don't do it as explicitly because I was getting very burnt out on that subject matter entirely, but unfortunately, it is everywhere. So I still kind of work with that in my current role. But I most recently started a second business as a coach. My primary sort of market is really women in their 20s to 40s who life is pretty good, but what if it could be better? Right. And so just
Mm-hmm.
really talking about that up level, how to really find our voice, step into who we are, feel even more confident, more comfortable, more empowered. And I'm loving the creativity and the variety that coaching brings. That's a bit different than therapy. So I think the two hats really complement each other. And coaching is still new for me. I'm about a year in. But I feel like with all my expertise of so many years of therapy and just being a
Mm-hmm.
human in the world, it isn't as new as it might be if that was like my first profession ever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
Mm. I'm curious your take being
Mhm.
in or having both different fields. Maybe you've been asked this question a billion times, but
Yeah.
what do you find is like the difference between therapy and coaching?
I think it's a great question because I think there's a lot of therapists who feel like coaching is a bad word and
Mm,
would never go there, where I feel that they are two very different services that are both necessary. So the biggest difference, just to boil it down, is therapy is about the past. It holds a diagnosis, there's a medical model to it, and you definitely want your therapist to have the right degrees and certifications and training to guide you through and unpack and heal and uncover how to navigate or live with X, Y, or Z diagnosis, experience,
mhm,
etc. Whereas coaching is forward thinking, it's present and future. We don't care about the why. We're not getting into like, but what about your mom or, whatever else. We should not be talking about trauma and things of that nature in a coaching setting. It's really like, I want to come in and I want to run a marathon. Okay, so here's what we need to do to get you marathon ready, right? You could have a ton of other stuff going on, but in that world, that's not the space or the place to unpack it. And you don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to have had something happen to you to have to come to coaching. So I think that they're very different roles. They overlap, but therapy should never be in coaching. You might use some coaching tools in therapy, but if your coach is ever trying to do therapy with you, then I would question what we're doing there, because that one does not belong there.
Interesting. I've never heard someone kind of use that distinction of like the past and staying there. And I feel like you kind of mentioned how it kind of bleeds, and where is it that it is okay and safe? Because I guess what I'm trying to make that distinction is like with coaching, and maybe it's the type of coach or
Mm-hmm.
kind of sector
Mm-hmm.
that we're looking at, right? Because I feel like no matter what, like a lot of our past comes with us, especially if we're not aware of it too, right? If maybe we've never done therapy
Yeah.
and it comes up. So how does that, yeah, like how do you create that separation?
So I think if, let's say, we were doing some coaching around, you want to be more of a morning person and you're like, I just have such a resistance to the morning. As a therapist, I'd be like, ooh, that's juicy. Like, tell me more. Why do you think you feel that way? What are the feelings that come up? Like, I'd want to get in there. As a
Yeah.
coach, it really doesn't matter why. You just do. So then what do we need to do to help you move past that resistance? So like, how do we want to think about the goals? We want to think about the who is the person who is the morning person, like woman, who's the Ashley Ann who's like killing the morning sector. That's a coaching question. Versus therapy, it might be helpful and it might be negligent to not ask, like,
Mm,
what's going on here? What does like morning mean to you? What's happened in the past with morning? So we definitely always bring ourselves into anything,
totally.
but we're really looking ahead in this very different and specific way in the coaching relationship that not everyone who's in therapy should be doing in that moment. That might not be possible. That might not be clinically the best place to go first. And that's where we do need to sit in the past. We do need to sit with the feelings. We need to sit with all the big, juicy, hard stuff. And in coaching, it's about the big, juicy stuff about who am I going to be? How am I going to step into that vision of person?
Mm,
Not as much about why am I feeling so stuck? I am, so therefore, what do I need to do just to move out of it? If that kind of makes sense.
mm.
It's not always
It
as black and
does.
white, but that's sort of the
Yeah,
the
it
essence I
definitely
try to
isn't.
hold.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy because I think I see a lot of coaches that are in this space and they are bringing that to it. And that obviously like there's this just piece around being able to, can you hold that space for someone? Do you have, I mean,
Yeah.
not to say that as a coach you can't have training to be able to do and support and facilitate, um, but a lot of coaches don't really have that safety. And I've heard of stories in the
Right.
past with, a dear friend of mine who has talked about coaching containers. And as an Indigenous woman, like the coach wasn't able
Mm.
to hold
Mm.
her, the trauma that was kind of like coming, we're talking about like
Mhm.
lineage and whatnot. And
Mhm.
that coach just could not hold that space for her.
Yeah. And it might be owning that maybe this isn't the space she needs. Maybe she needed a different type of space. And sometimes you don't know till you're in it, right?
True.
And again, it's such the wild west with coaching. It's definitely less regulated. Anyone could say they're a coach. I personally went through a training led by a therapist who's also a coach, and it was for therapists who want to coach because we do
Mm.
know maybe too much sometimes. And so really making sure we're doing this ethically and we're really protecting the individual as well as ourselves, our professional self. So I might overthink it more than maybe somebody else just because
Mm.
I can't unknow what I know, but how to
Yeah.
make the two separate. But I think it's also a really great strength to be able to say, like, I might not be the right person, or this might not be the right space. At the end of the day, money is not the thing that should be the top tier. It should really be the client's needs and what they would benefit from most. And sometimes we figure that out on the journey, and that space might look a little different because they're not the same thing, you know?
Yeah. And that's a powerful thing as, I think I'm looking at it more so from the perspective of like being a client, or you search for a coach, and I think no matter what, like coaches need coaches in a sense too. Like we all just
Mm-hmm.
have that support, you know what I mean? We all just
Yeah.
have that support. Is such a beautiful thing to have in our, whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, but I also kind of am seeing even just through the conversation is just how beautiful they actually kind of go hand in hand in a sense too, right? Like
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
is so supportive in ways. But as like client, to be able to make those distinctions and be able to be empowered to know exactly what you're looking for, and not get so distracted by all the things that are available, because
Yeah.
there is so much available in
So
this
much.
beautiful world of
So
social
much.
media. I
Yes.
know there's both. I know there's both sides of it, but to be
Yeah.
able, I feel like that's such a big part is knowing yourself and really being able to check in with yourself and kind of like make that distinction. What am I really needing in this moment, or in this time of my life? Being able to
Yeah.
make that distinction is so empowering.
Yes. And trusting at the end of the day, you're your own best expert. I could
Yeah.
know 10 things about anxiety or how to help it. But at the end of the day, you're the one living with it. You're going to tell me what works, what doesn't work, what's going on, how you feel. Coaching. I could have good ideas or help ask some questions, but at the end of the day, you're the expert on how you're going to get there. So
Mhm.
I think it's hard sometimes, especially as women. I think we're not necessarily trust our gut to appease, to make other people happy first, to like defer, to ask permission. And it can be hard to really trust and listen to ourselves, but nobody else knows what we need like we know. And if we're just handing that power out so willy-nilly, wow, like what a waste of control that we're giving up. And we're not going to be as satisfied, because even if someone with the best intentions, like hopefully someone not with malicious intentions gets that power, they still don't know. Like they still can't guess. So they still are going to maybe be making choices, or we're going to be on a path that doesn't feel as great because we're not actually in the driver's seat of our own life. We're letting somebody else be in that seat. And that is not a way to live. And it's not very fulfilling for them or for me at the end of the day.
100%, 100%. And I feel like that like goes down the road of, when you talk and one of the things that you, I guess, one of the messages that you kind of want to bring forward is this like being able to reclaim our yes. And that is such a big part of that, right? Like being
Mm-hmm.
able to take back control in, there's so many ways that we can take back control in our lives, like from the
Yeah.
decisions that we make, from like taking back the narrative that we kind of put out. There's so many ways that we can take back that control, and I'm curious like what's kind of been your journey with being able to, I guess, reclaim that, if you do have kind of like a backstory behind that.
Yeah. For so long, I think what I struggled with was not believing. I think it goes down to like self-worth, right? This self-worth
Mm.
is this inherent idea that we are just worthy because we are. Self-esteem, a bit more of like a mindset and based off external. But I think at the end of the day, people struggle more with self-worth than actually self-esteem. And for me, I had some experiences in the past where it really shattered my sense of self-worth, knowingly or unknowingly. I don't know that I was using those words at the
Mhm.
time, but the longer I've lived and the more experiences I've had, I realize how quick I am to give up my yes for the sake of someone else, for the sake of someone's comfort, for someone else's maybe perceived happiness, to make the energy just feel better. And in the long term, what I was doing was really losing sight of my own vision, my own power, my own purpose. And I was really limiting myself, almost putting myself in this very small box I had definitely outgrown. And I was ignoring the discomfort. I was like, well, it's fine. It's fine. And it wasn't until I really was honest of like, this is not fine. And
Yeah.
really realized how much more expansion I had in me and like how much more room I needed, that then I was like, oh, okay, I need to be a lot more intentional about what I say yes to. I might not always say yes to things I want to do, but even if it's something I'm not loving, I'm still going to choose to say yes to it. And that is more
Yeah.
empowering than being like, oh, I have to do this thing, or they're making me feel this way, or this is happening to me. If I'm just the
Mhm.
victim in my story the whole time, like that's not helpful at all. Right. So
Right.
even if I have to like do stuff I don't always want to do or show up in ways that aren't as comfortable, I still can say I still have a choice in this at the end of the day. And I'm still
Yeah.
choosing to do that. And just that little reframe can change the entire situation and how I experience it, how I feel about it, and what happens after.
Yeah. Oh, I 100%. I think about just being in a relationship, right? Like there are going to be things that your partner really wants to do and you might not be on board. Or,
Yeah.
it could even just be the simple little thing of just like hanging out with friends and you're kind of just like, I'm not up for it. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
go, but like your partner really wants you to go and be there. And it
Mm-hmm.
is that little, like just that piece of finding, okay, I'm not necessarily 100% like wanting to do this, but like I'm doing it this for this person, or just
Mm-hmm.
finding those
Mm-hmm.
reframes that we can create for ourselves. But yes, still, no matter what, we're in control of just the decision that we're making. No one's forcing us to do anything.
Right. Right. One of my colleagues had this really great way of describing, because in a way it's setting boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And she was saying how boundaries are actually a way of connection. It is like by actually setting clear and accurate boundaries, it helps someone know us even better. And I think
Mm,
sometimes we think of it as a wall that's pushing people away, and when we think of it as this beautiful thing that actually draws people closer, I was like, wow, I knew that on like I talk about boundaries a lot in my work, but just to hear that picture and get to see it in that other way, I was like, oh my God, yes, those are the words, right? And so it's because if I'm being true to myself, then you know who I am, you know where my lines are, we're not confused, and now we're closer because of it. If I constantly say, yes, I want to go have sushi with you, and I hate sushi, you think I love sushi because I say yes every time. You don't really
yeah.
know me. I'm unhappy. So I'm not actually, this is actually a terrible disconnect by me trying to be nice and not be too much and just say, sure, I'll get sushi. When I should just say, you know what, I actually hate sushi, which I love it. But this version of me, I hate it. And, so let's find something else. And then we can connect more authentically over that because I've set that boundary versus this facade and this discomfort that's sort of actually keeping us farther apart by not letting you know that.
Gosh, I've never heard anyone say explain boundaries like that. Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, what a way to really just shift. We were saying, it's perspective. Like everything is perspective, and I think we often hear boundaries, and there's just like this like negative connotation that's related to boundaries, and this piece around bringing more connection is couldn't be so couldn't be more true in
Right.
just hearing that.
Right.
Wow. Oh
And
my
it's
gosh.
freeing, right?
Yeah, for both ourselves and
And the
the other
person we love.
person.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, I always look at it, the more that we could be in our most authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
um, the more permission that we give other people. And, the more that we can set
Yes.
boundaries and we give other people to set those boundaries. Like it's all
Yes.
this beautiful dance and mirror of being able to give each other permission to be honest, like to be honest about who we are, about what we want, about how we're feeling, and not
Yeah.
feeling like at every time of the day I need to be perfect and on,
Right. Right.
because that's so not true.
Impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impossible,
Yeah.
and especially, I mean, this layer of being a woman, and this is just something that I've been just more conscious about is, we have our cycle and we are literally different at so
Yes.
many every
Yes.
day, our energy levels. And
Yes.
so, I used to I used to shame myself a lot for,
Mm.
making a commitment to something, and then the day comes and I'm like, this is the last thing that I want to do. Like,
Right.
I have no energy to do this, and I just want to do this instead, or I just
Right.
literally don't want to do anything. And I think for a long time I really shamed myself until, like,
Mhm.
I now being in this place, I'm like, I'm not going to make this wrong. I'm not going to make this wrong that, yes, I've made this commitment, and I think there's a level of honesty that we have to make
Of course. Yeah.
and have when we are maybe canceling on a commitment that we have.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily there is always something wrong, especially if you're very honest about it too.
Right. And that's an example of you reclaiming your yes, right? I don't want to say yes to that anymore. I'm saying yes to staying home and taking a bath and taking care of myself if I don't feel well, or whatever, or maybe I feel fine but I just don't feel like going out. I'm reclaiming
Yeah.
that part. And I do think that a lot of times we feel we need to make very small amount of waves to not cause too many problems, and that isn't always, one, it might not cause as big of a wave as you're imagining. And two, it's probably going to be worse for everyone if you're at dinner with your friend. I must be hungry. I'm talking about dinner. At dinner with your friend, like totally miserable. I'd rather someone just say they don't want to go than spend money and go out and like put makeup on and all of that, and then have them just be like, I don't really want to
Miserable.
be here. Like, that's not fun
Miserable.
for anybody.
No, exactly. And our energy is everything, right? Like,
Hmm.
we come in and we impact other people's energy, and vice versa. We have to look
Yes.
at that all the same. And so 100%, I would rather my friend be like, I'm just not up to it. My
Yep.
friend, my sibling, whatever it is, I'd rather them just say, I'm not up for it.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Like, you were honest about it, and I love you and I respect you, and that's all good with me. And guess what? You just gave me permission. The next time, like, I don't feel 100%, well,
I
I'm just
can
going to be
say
like,
no.
hey, I could say no. No thanks.
Yeah.
There was one thing too that you were, talking about self-worth. One of the things that I
Hmm.
kind of wanted to get your take on it is, how do you define self-worth? I'm curious. I always am curious, these words that get thrown around so much. And so, just that being something that came up, like, what's your explanation on self-worth?
So when I think of self-worth, I think of the everybody is inherently born worthy. So like when a baby comes out, they do the strangest things and we think it's amazing. Oh my God, you pooped. Or my cat, right? Well, we're talking about humans, but like, oh my God, you pooped. Oh my God, you made a noise. Oh my God, you're here. You have hands and toes and. And so that baby just like didn't had to do nothing to earn it being a worthy little being.
Mhm.
And somehow along the line, we lose sight of the fact, or we stop believing the fact that just because I'm here, the worth is there. Like, pick it up and wear it. We have it on the ground next to us, and we're like trying to prove to the world that we deserve it, or prove to ourselves, or figure out the magic code to get it. And it's just right there, right? And I just read Catherine Morgan Schaffler's book, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. And she talks a lot about these two topics because, especially as perfectionists, always trying to prove something, to get it all right. And I think that journey, and it's kind of this really mind-blowing idea of like, wait, what? I don't have to do anything. Like, I can just show up and I'm worthy. And that doesn't settle all the time well, especially for someone who identifies as a perfectionist. But that it's so simple. Like, it's so simple and so complex at the same time, but there's not a lot to it. Like, you're a human, you're here, you have worth, you have value to bring to the world, you deserve a seat at the table, there's enough for everyone. And somehow we just don't seem to believe that, especially as a culture anymore, and we don't really seem to lift up that message all the time. And I think as individuals, we sometimes have a hard time really believing it's that easy when it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah. And I'm not going to make any assumptions. And I know we kind of like waver in things, but I also don't want to make the assumption that you don't waver in it. But how do you kind of embody that, right? Like, that piece around, like, I am worthy just because it is
Mm-hmm.
so true, especially when you can look at, if you have young ones in your life and in your world, and if you were to just look at them, and how would you ever simply tell them that they are not worthy? Or also you look at a maybe a photo of yourself when you were younger, and how could you probably now looking at that photo of yourself, you're just like, oh, she was so worthy. You know what I mean?
Right,
Or
right,
your best friend, your
right,
sibling. Would you
right.
ever tell them that they are not worthy? I highly doubt that that would ever be the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
We are so easy, and that's, the whole thing. We're our own worst critic, right? Like, we
yep,
can dish it out to other people, but it's that receiving part of it that makes it so complex and complicated. But
yep.
how do you kind of harness that, that belief, and stay in that?
Definitely an everyday struggle at times. Some days I believe it much more than others. And certain years of my life, I've really been able to embody that much more than others. But I think what it comes back to at the end of the day is if I'm trying to live in alignment with my truest self and with the vision that I have for my life, if I try to stay there, then by proxy, I also am then at least admitting on some level that I deserve these things. I have worth. I have things to bring. I'm allowed to have a vision. I'm allowed to have goals and make decisions. And I think by trying to anchor to some of these other pieces, it forces me to also reconnect with my perception and belief that I too have worth. Because if my dream is, I want to, like, the fact that I started a second business, like, who am I to like tell anyone anything, right? I must believe I have something to offer. And so to go after that gut of like, I think this would be good, I really want to do this, it's getting back to that, like, okay, I have an inherent worth to bring to the table, I have a voice, I have something to share. When I'm living out of alignment, when everyone's a competition, or I hate myself, or I'm unhappy, then I'm not believing that as much. I'm not focused on those things. I'm focused on all the have-nots and the
Mm-hmm.
deficits. And it then is because I'm living out of alignment of my vision, my purpose, my true self. So for me, it's kind of, how do I keep coming back to that? And again, not all the time, not every day,
Totally.
but it's, for me, that's a nice visual of how to
Mhm.
like recalibrate. When you're out of alignment physically, or your car. So this is, it's like it feels off. So, how can I get back as close to aligned as possible, as
Yeah.
often as possible?
Yeah. I had this conversation recently with someone, and she kind of shared something that landed, and this is what I think about too with what you're saying is it's so easy to feel stuck when we
Mm,
are doing everything that everybody else is doing.
yes.
And that landed so deeply with me, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, when I am trying to kind of live the goals that I'm seeing other people have, and doing the things that they're doing, and I feel kind of frustrated and stuck, and I'm overthinking, I'm just in this negative headspace, and I'm kind
Yeah.
of like what I call like spiraling, not in
Yeah.
a good way. I'm in that
Yeah.
downward spiral, that negative self-talk, that place of just not believing in who I am. It's often because I am thinking about everybody else's vision and
Yep.
their goals and what they're doing, and
Yep.
not checking in with myself and saying, hey, what's true for Ashley? And that
Yep.
comes down to, what is our definition of success? What is your definition, especially for those that are building a business? Like,
Yeah.
coming back to that piece around like, why am I doing this? What do
Right.
I actually want my business to look like?
Right.
Because a lot of people are throwing out around this $1 million business
Yeah.
nonsense. And maybe
Yeah.
that doesn't even feel true for you, but you think you should. You think you
Right.
should want that,
Right.
right? Because there's
Right.
also people who are in the space around showing us and here to tell us how worthy we are.
Yeah.
And they're also the same people that are telling us, you can have the
But
$1 million, you can do
you
this.
should be doing all of these things too. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that just might not be true for you. And it's
Right.
that piece around just like continuously that alignment, that constant check, right? We do constant checks on our car, the example that you gave,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
we check our oil all the time
Yep.
on our cars,
Yep.
but
Tire
we're not
rotation
doing that.
for
We're not doing
ourselves.
that for ourselves.
And I think it just keeps going back to this idea of if you don't trust yourself, if you inherently don't believe you have good ideas or good vision, or you don't listen to your gut, then you're just going to be throwing tons of spaghetti at the wall, and you are just going to be trying to replicate what everyone else is doing, whatever the
Sure.
next like tip is. And I think there's a huge difference between seeking mentorship and seeing what other people are doing and like using that as creative energy, and like community produces bigger things than maybe like one person alone. But that's a very different exercise than I just need a copy. Oh, I should be doing that. Oh, it's been too long. Oh, and like running around and using all your energy on things that don't feel good, and honestly, I think those people don't really see a lot of fruit at the end because it's not really developing good roots, and there isn't actually a product or whatever, coming
Mm-hmm.
out of it. It's
Totally.
confusing for the person looking at it, and it's confusing for the person doing it. So
Yeah.
it's really just putting your blinders on for those purposes and saying, my timeline's my timeline. My life is my life. My goals are my goals. They're allowed to change. They're allowed to shift. I'm allowed to pivot, but I need to make sure I'm doing it because I gave that like check mark, not because someone else told me, hey, you should
Mm-hmm.
do this, or that should be your goal, or you're doing that wrong. It's like really reclaiming the trust in ourselves too, that I think we've lost because we've been giving the wheel away to everyone else all these years. So like, you want me to drive? Oh, I don't know. Like if I haven't practiced that, if all I've been doing is passing it along, then I don't trust that I'm the best person to be driving the car. I don't best that I
No.
actually know what I need for my life. So that's going to take time and like a tough love and learning that muscle again. But oh, it is so freeing, and it's so rewarding and important to do.
In your own experience, or just like, what are ways that we can begin to trust ourselves again and have that belief? Like, and especially too, I think it's like we have to start small, but I'm curious, like, what are some of the ways that you've done that for yourself, or you've seen, yeah.
I always think of that. Maybe I'm dating myself, but if anyone's seen Runaway Bride, I always think of the scene with Julia Roberts when she's like, oh my God, I don't even know how I take my eggs. Because she always just took them the way that whoever she was engaged to at the time took theirs. And so she sat down and she tried all the eggs to see which one she really liked. And that is such a very like simple thing. Like, how do you take your eggs? But that's some examples, right? Like, but what do I actually like? What do I really want? What do I even really like? What does that even feel like or look like? It could be something around food. It could be around a business vision. It could be around a family. Like maybe you're like, I don't know if I want kids, but you come from family where you're going to have 10 kids and you're like, wait, maybe I don't want 10. Or, getting married. When I was getting married, I researched every tradition. I was like, why do I wear white? Why does someone have a bridesmaid? Why would there be a veil? Why would I say these words? Why are you giving me away? Like, I'm not a property, right? What does this mean? Why, like, because I wanted to know before I just did it. And for me,
Yeah.
that was it felt really empowering. So when I made some choices that were more basic traditions, I understood why I was doing it. And even if maybe it was like, oh, I still just like it, or, oh no, that's really cool. I like that. Or there was some I was like, oh, absolutely not. I'm so uninterested.
Yeah.
For the birds, like didn't do it. And that was my way of like figuring out what I believed and wanted, because especially, and I know right now, like that train industry is like, you have to do all the things, like you don't have to do anything. So it's really freeing to say, okay, in this mess of an industry where you're told you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z in 80 different ways,
Mm-hmm.
like what do I want to do and why am I doing it? And I don't think we ask those questions enough. So it's like, what do I even like? What does this even feel like? What do I even believe? What is the origin of this? Like, why do I do this thing? And those can be some really small steps to sort of figuring that out and reconnecting, I think, with that trust and those parts of ourselves as well.
Yeah. The word that I think of is just like this curiosity,
Yes.
curiosity of, the simplest question is asking yourself, like, why? Wait, why do I do this? Why?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just getting curious again about
Yeah.
yourself. And there's so many different tools too. I mean, I, a couple of years ago, learned about human design. And that was also this beautiful tool that allowed me to really see myself and also allowed me to rebuild this trust in myself just by
Yeah.
learning about it and learning about how I was meant to make decisions and trying that on and seeing like, oh wow, this does feel good and this does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And in knowing this tiny little piece of who I am, I get to bring that into all of my relationships. And, now when
Exactly.
it comes to figuring out what we're having for dinner, I tell my fiance, I'm like, listen, give me two options. I need two
I know I
options.
work within well. Yes, exactly. No,
And then
it's
I'll
so
know. I'll give you an answer from that. And if I
right.
still don't have an answer, well, you might need to give me two more options.
And it means I didn't want those two, and I actually knew more than I
Yeah.
thought I knew.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this dance, right? And I think a big piece is being comfortable or
Mm,
getting comfortable
yeah.
with the experimentation in a
Yeah.
way, like
Yeah.
that's a experimentation, exploration, like, and not rushing that, and also knowing that you're gonna be in this phase of your probably forever, like there's
Yeah.
gonna be this dance, right? You're gonna
Yep.
have maybe a couple years of full exploration, and then there's
Yeah.
gonna be years that you're just gonna know exactly what you're doing and you're like full steam ahead and you've got the blinders on.
Yep.
And we do this dance with the seasons that we're into, and I think it's just also being able to honor what season we're in, especially too when
100%.
we got to put those blinders on.
And I would say at the end of the day, I know we as humans don't like taking risks and we like what's comfortable. You know,
Mhm.
our primitive brain's always just trying to keep us alive. So it really wants to keep out what it doesn't know. But if you truly are listening to yourself, I will bet you a lot of money that you're not going to end up in a bad place. If the practice you're truly engaging in is taking that risk on your gut, taking that risk on your vision, taking that risk on something that you truly feel you're aligned with, odds are you're not going to find yourself in a bad way or something you can't come back from. So it does feel scary, but the more you do it and the more you see that positive return, the less scary it gets, or the shorter that scary feeling lasts. And this, the more
Mhm.
automatic you can step into that intuition because you have all this evidence saying, yeah, that's actually like a safe idea. My brain's not like, oh, I don't know, danger. It's kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yes, actually, we can do this. And it gets easier in a way over
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. Oof. I love that. I love that. And I always love to end conversations with asking you if you were to kind of distill your journey into like one piece of advice for those that are listening right now in this moment, what feels like true, what feels like that one piece of advice that you would share?
I think I'd say always bet on yourself. No one's going to do
Mm.
it like you. No one's going to do it as good as you. No one's going to do it as beautiful, creative, incredible as you. You have something so important to share with the world that we need. And if you're not sharing it, we're missing out. You're missing out. So take the risk, bet on yourself, put it out there. It doesn't have to be on social media or anything crazy, but someone in your orbit needs what you have. And don't not put it out there because of fear or because of a lack of trust. So I'm betting on you. I hope you're betting on yourself too. That would be my advice.
Love that. That's so good. And I feel like that's such a reminder too that I need to hear. So thank you for
You're
saying
welcome.
that,
Of
for
course.
trusting yourself and saying that in this moment too.
Yeah. I feel like I probably needed to hear it as well, which is probably
Right?
why I said it. So
I love it. And so for those that are tuning in and want to follow you and the things that you're doing, and if there's anything that you want to share, I'd love for you to, share what people can follow you, anything you have going on.
yeah, so you can go to my Instagram. It's at alicia.bowker.mudrock. And that has links to my website and all my other things. It's probably the easiest place. I actually have a book club that I run, a coaching book club, and I'm reopening up spots in July for our second half. So I choose more like self-help type themed books. I have like a curated journal. We meet every month, but we read the book over 2 months just to give us time to to soak it in. We have a community. So it's a really rich space. It's awesome. It's all women. So if that feels like something you're interested in, I'm opening that up again. And I'm also getting trained in Pilates teacher certification. I've been practicing for years. It's time. So I'm hopeful by fall, I'll also be having some really fun Pilates offerings mixed in with my coaching. In addition to, I do offer also individual coaching as well. So lots of really fun stuff. Oh, and my colleague and I, the one with the wisdom around boundaries, we're also going to be doing a 5-week course on say yes to yourself. So lots of fun stuff coming later this year. I have to move and do some stuff first, and then I'll have the bandwidth. But it's going to be a fun summer, fall. So yeah, if you follow me or check out my website, you'll be able to keep up to date. I have a newsletter as well that I'm always updating everyone every week on what's going on. So yeah.
So exciting. I'm so excited for you and for all the beautiful things that are to come. And I'm just also so grateful for this conversation in so many ways, just being able to have this conversation around trusting ourselves and reclaiming our yes, and all these beautiful things are just things that, we hear things often, people talking about this. And it doesn't hurt to have this like reminder. And, sometimes we just hear things differently at the right time. And I always have full trust that those that tune into this episode, no matter what time it is, are going to be the ones that need it. So thank you for co-creating this conversation with me.
No, thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure. I've had a great time and also was very rich and fulfilling. I'm walking away very energized. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And to those that are tuning in and listening, thank you. And just like Alicia said, bet on yourself. And I can't wait to share another episode. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.